Hello, friend. Welcome back. Come in. Come in. Make yourself comfortable. If you're new here tonight, I'm so glad you found your way to this place. Pull your blanket a little closer. Let your head sink into your pillow. Let your feet go soft and warm beneath the covers. There is nothing required of you here except to rest and to listen, and even the listening is gentle. You can let the words wash over you like water, and take whatever you need from them, and let the rest go. Tonight I want to tell you a story about a man who crossed an ocean with almost nothing in his pocket and a very specific, very ordinary dream in his chest. Not a grand dream, not the kind you see in movies, not the kind with speeches and crowds and dramatic music. Just a quiet dream, the kind that most people carry without even telling anyone about it, because it seems too small to say out loud and also too important to risk having dismissed. The dream was $100, and what that $100 meant, and what happened when a man spent 20 years trying to earn his way toward it. My name is Amir, and this is my story. I was born in a city in Iran called Tabriz, which sits in the northwest of the country, close to the mountains and not far from the border with Turkey and Azerbaijan. Tabriz is an old city, very old. One of the oldest continuously inhabited places in the world, people say, though I grew up there without thinking much about that. When you are a child, the place where you are born is simply the world. You don't think of it as ancient or interesting or worth explaining. It is just where the bread comes from, where your school is, where your grandmother lives 2 streets over, and can be visited on foot. The city sits in a high valley, and so the air is clean and sometimes very cold. In the winters, the mountains around it turn white with snow, and when the sun comes out after a snowfall, everything is so bright you have to squint to see it. In the summers, the valley heats up in a dry, honest way, not humid, just warm, the air still and clear in the afternoons, the evenings cooling off as the sun dropped behind the mountains. I grew up with those mountains always at the edges of my vision. They were so constant that I barely noticed them when I was a child. I notice them now, in memory, with a great deal of feeling. My family was not wealthy and not desperate. We were the kind of family that is sometimes called middle class, in translation, but which is really its own category. The category of people who have enough to have stability, and not enough to have ease, who work hard and maintain a careful household and worry about money, without being defined by worrying about money. My father was a mechanic who had his own small repair shop near the bazaar. My mother worked as a seamstress from our home, taking in alteration and tailoring work for neighbors, and eventually for a bridal shop across the city that sent her dresses to modify. Our house was small and well kept. My mother cleaned it with a thoroughness that I have never seen matched anywhere since. There was always food. There was always tea. There were books, though not many, and the books were shared carefully among all of us. I have one brother, older by 4 years, named Darius, who is still in Tabriz, who has our father's shop now that our father has retired. We talk on the phone every week, Darius and I, and the conversations are always too short and somehow also complete. We cover everything that matters in 20 minutes and then say goodbye and carry the conversation with us until the next one. I was the one who left. In many families, one goes and one stays, and it is not always clear in advance which child will be which. I did not know, when I was young, that I would be the one who left. I had no plan for it, no single moment of decision. It was more like a direction that became clear to me gradually over years, through the accumulation of small things, a feeling of wanting to see more, of wanting to build something in a place where the building felt more possible, of a restlessness that was not dissatisfaction with where I came from, but rather a kind of reaching, the way a plant reaches toward light without knowing that is what it is doing. I came to the United States when I was 28 years old. I had a student visa and a place at a university in Michigan, where I would study mechanical engineering, which was the practical application of everything I had grown up watching my father do with his hands and his knowledge of how things worked. I had a single large suitcase and a shoulder bag and the particular dazed feeling of someone who has been in transit for very long. Too many hours, too many connections, too many cups of bad coffee in too many airports. And I had, in the zippered inside pocket of that shoulder bag, the equivalent of $100 in a mixture of currencies. That was what I had left after the visa fees and the travel costs and the first month's rent deposit that the university housing required in advance. $100. Or close to it. I had counted it several times on the plane, and it came out a little differently each time, because I was too tired to do the conversion accurately, but approximately $100. I remember looking at it once, somewhere over the Atlantic, while the plane was dark and most people were sleeping. I had taken the little wallet out and looked at what was in it, and I had thought, with a calm that surprised me, a calm that was maybe just exhaustion wearing the costume of acceptance, I thought, this is what I have. This is what I am beginning with. And then I put it away and looked out the window at the dark and the stars, and after a while I fell asleep too. The city I came to was Detroit, or rather a suburb east of Detroit where the university was located. Michigan in October, which is when I arrived, is a particular kind of beautiful that I was not prepared for. The trees, and there were so many trees, more than I had seen in any single place in my life, were at their full autumn color, and driving from the airport past all of that red and orange and gold in the flat, gray October light, I kept turning my head to look, and then turning it back, and then looking again. I had seen photographs of American autumn before, but photographs do not convey the scale of it, the way it goes on and on. One tree and then another, and then a whole street of them, and then a whole neighborhood. I thought of my mother, who would have found it beautiful. I thought of my father, who would have looked at it once and then looked away, because he was not a man who spent much time in aesthetic appreciation, not out of blindness, but out of a kind of practical orientation toward the world that I had always admired even when I didn't share it. The university housing was a small apartment in a building, shared with other graduate students, most of them international like me. People from India, from China, from Nigeria, from Brazil, from South Korea. The apartment was furnished in the minimal way of student housing. A bed, a desk, a small dresser, a kitchen with the basic equipment, a bathroom. The carpet was beige. The walls were off-white. The window looked out over a parking lot, which was not beautiful, but which let in light in the mornings, and which I came to be fond of in the particular way. You become fond of what is yours. The first few weeks were the strangest of my life. Not difficult in any acute way. Not dramatic, as I promised you this story would not be, but strange in the deep interior way of being in a place where all the signals are unfamiliar. Not just the language, which I spoke with reasonable competence, but not with fluency, not with the easy naturalness of someone who had always lived inside it. But everything else too, the sounds of the streets, the way people moved through public spaces, the food in the supermarkets, the particular cadence of American friendliness which is warm and immediate and also, I learned, does not necessarily lead to closeness. The way people said, "How are you?" as a greeting rather than a question, which confused me for longer than I want to admit. I was not homesick in the way I had feared I would be, not incapacitated by it, not unable to function, but I was aware, every day, of the specific texture of what I had left. The smell of my mother's kitchen, the particular quality of Tabriz light in the early morning, the sound of the call to prayer floating over the neighborhood, which I had grown up with, and which I had not known, I would miss until it was absent. Darius's voice on the other end of the phone, once a week, covering everything in 20 minutes. I had $100 approximately. My stipend from the graduate program was enough to cover my rent and food and basic costs, but it was not generous, and it required very careful management. I bought food at the lowest cost I could find. I did not buy things I didn't need. I walked when I could walk instead of taking any form of transportation that cost money. I cooked almost everything I ate, learning to approximate Iranian food with the ingredients I could find, which sometimes worked better than expected, and sometimes resulted in something that was nutritious and edible but bore only a philosophical resemblance to what I was trying to make. During this time, the $100 stayed where it was. I want to explain about the $100, because it was not simply a last resort, not simply money I was saving against emergency. It had become something else, something I had decided it would be, in the way that a person can sometimes take an ordinary thing and make it into something meaningful through the act of deciding that it is meaningful. On the plane, somewhere over the Atlantic, when I had looked at what I had and thought, this is what I am beginning with, what I had also thought, without fully forming it into words, was, this is what I will not spend. This is the thing that stays. I cannot fully explain the logic of it because there wasn't one. Exactly. It was more like a feeling than a logic. The feeling that if I could keep this $100, protect it, carry it through whatever the beginning years required, then I would know that I had made it through those beginning years. That the $100 would be a proof. Not of wealth, obviously. Not of success in any conventional measure, but of having gotten from the plane to the other side of the beginning, intact. And also, if I am honest, there was something else inside the feeling. A specific image that I had carried from before I left Iran, an image my father had given me without knowing he was giving it to me. A day years before, when I was maybe 16, and I had come into the repair shop after school and my father was alone in the shop. The last customer had gone, the day was done, and he was sitting at his small desk in the corner, where he did his paperwork, and he had his wallet open, and he was counting what was in it. He didn't know I could see him. He counted it twice, slowly, with the same calm he brought to everything, and then he put it away and closed the wallet, and sat for a moment with his hands flat on the desk. He was not a man who showed what he felt. But in that moment, in the quality of his stillness, I understood that he was tired. Not just from that day, but from all the days. From the long, careful management of a modest life. From the perpetual arithmetic of enough and not quite enough. He was tired in the specific way of someone who has worked very hard for a very long time without any particular rest from the working. I had never wanted that for myself. I had not thought the thought harshly. I did not judge my father. I never have. He was a man of enormous dignity and his life was not diminished by its modesty. But I had wanted for myself to build something that moved in a different direction. And the $100 was the beginning of that. The seed of it. The proof that I could begin. I finished my master's degree in 2 years and stayed for a PhD. By the 3rd year, I had a teaching assistantship that paid a little better and I had also begun doing consulting work for a small engineering firm that had a connection to the university. Small projects, calculations and drawings that I could do on evenings and weekends. The money from these things went into a savings account that I watched carefully and added to consistently, like tending something that grew slowly. The $100 stayed in its pocket. I moved it from the shoulder bag to a small wooden box on my desk, a box I had found at an estate sale for 50 cents, plain wood with a simple latch. I was aware that keeping cash in a box was impractical in all kinds of ways, and I did not care. The impracticality was part of the point somehow. It was a deliberate act, keeping it that way, a daily small decision not to absorb it into the ordinary accounting of my life. In the 4th year, I met my wife. Her name was Linda. She was from the south of Ohio originally, a small town near the Kentucky border, and had come to Michigan for graduate school in library science, which was both her profession and a genuine passion. She was the kind of person who talked about books the way other people talk about music or food, with that particular, animated quality of someone describing something they love from the inside. She had brown hair, and a very direct way of looking at people when they were speaking. A habit of full attention that I had found startling at first and had come to love more than almost anything. We met at a university event that neither of us had particularly wanted to attend, and both had gone to because it felt like the right thing to do. We were standing near the same table of food, and she asked me where I was from, and I told her, and she told me she had read a novel by an Iranian author recently and wanted to know if I thought the translation was good, and I said I hadn't read that novel, and she looked momentarily concerned, as if perhaps she had been misdirected about something, and then she said, "Well, you should," and that was the beginning. We were married 3 years later, after I had finished my PhD and taken a job with an engineering firm in Columbus, Ohio. The wedding was small and honest. Her family, modest in size, and a few friends from graduate school, and a video call on a laptop propped on a chair, so that my parents and Darius could see from Tabriz. My mother cried on the video call. My father sat very straight and nodded several times in the way he nodded when he approved of something, and didn't want to make a fuss about approving. I carried the wooden box with the $100 to Columbus. It sat on my desk in our apartment, and Linda knew about it. I had told her the story of it early in our relationship, in the way you tell people the things that are strange and specific to yourself, when you trust them enough, and she understood it, or she accepted it, which is sometimes the deeper form of understanding. Columbus was the place where I finally, after years of careful building, began to find the footing I had been working toward. The engineering firm was good work, genuinely interesting, and I was good at it. I was promoted twice in 3 years. We bought a house, a modest one, a fixer-upper in a neighborhood of other modest houses, with maples in the front yards, in a city that was large enough to have opportunities and small enough to still feel like a place rather than just a population. Linda got a job at the Columbus Metropolitan Library, in the branch closest to our house, and she was so happy in that job that the happiness was visible on her face when she came home in the evenings, the same way contentment is visible in a person who has found the place they belong. We had a son. We named him Cyrus, which is a name from the old history of the land I came from, and which also worked easily in English, which felt right, a name that could live in both worlds. He was born on a Thursday in November, early in the morning before it was light, and the first time I held him was in a dim hospital room with the window just beginning to show the grey of dawn, and I sat in the chair by the window and held him and looked at his face, which was new and complete and perfect in the way that only a few things in a life are perfect. I thought of my father sitting at his desk in the repair shop, wallet in hand, tired in the way of long work. I thought, I will show you what this became. I thought, everything I began on that plane, I began so that this would be possible. This child, this window, this dawn, the $100. Cyrus was 4 years old when I finally took the $100 out of the wooden box and did something with it. I want to tell you what I did, because it is the heart of the story, or at least the part of the story that made everything else make sense. I had been thinking for years, since before Cyrus was born, about what I wanted to do with it eventually. Not with the specific $100, but with the meaning I had given it. The proof of beginning, the seed of something. I had thought about many things. I have thought about framing the bills. I have thought about donating them to something. I have thought about burying them in the garden of the house, which was not rational, but which had a poetry to it, that I could appreciate even while acknowledging the impracticality. But in the end what I did was simpler and more direct than any of those things. I bought tools. Not many, $100 does not buy many tools, even at the modest end of the price range. But I bought a small, specific set of basic woodworking tools, because Cyrus had recently become interested in building things, in the way that 4-year-olds become interested in things, intensely, totally, without any clear reason. He built constantly with his blocks and with anything else he could find. He wanted to know how things were put together. He had that specific quality of attention when something mechanical was involved. The same quality I had recognized in myself at his age. The same quality I had recognized in my father's hands. I wanted to build something with him. And I wanted the materials for the building to come from that place. From that seed. From the $100 that had come across the ocean in my shoulder bag on the night that everything began. We built a birdhouse. That is the whole of the dramatic event. A father and a 4-year-old boy, on a Saturday afternoon in April, in the garage of a modest house in Columbus, Ohio, building a birdhouse with tools that cost approximately $100. It took most of the afternoon, and the result was imperfect in the way that things built by beginners are imperfect, slightly uneven, with a roof that did not quite align the way I had drawn it, and a hole that was a little too large for the size of bird it was supposedly designed for. But it was real. It was wood held together by nails that we had driven with a hammer, Cyrus's hand over mine on the handle, both of us feeling the resistance of the wood, and the give of it when the nail went in right. It was the smell of sawdust, which is one of the best smells in the world, and the sound of Cyrus saying in the serious 4-year-old way, "Bubba, is this part right?" And me saying, "Yes, exactly right. You did that exactly right." We painted it red, which was his choice, and hung it in the backyard from the branch of the ash tree near the fence. Birds used it. Several years of birds used it. It is still out there. Paint faded now, listing a little to one side, but still holding. When I hung it in the tree, I stood there for a moment in the backyard in the April afternoon, Cyrus beside me holding the hammer that was too big for him, both of us looking up at this small red imperfect thing in the branches. And I felt, I'm going to try to describe this accurately, I felt the completion of something. Not the end of something, nothing was ending. But the way a circle closes, the way the last note of a piece of music resolves into a chord that tells you, this is where it was always going. The $100 had become a birdhouse. The birdhouse was in a backyard in Columbus, Ohio. And in that backyard was a man who had come a long way with almost nothing, and a small boy who had no idea yet how much had been carried so that he could stand here, in this yard, in this ordinary beautiful afternoon, holding a hammer. My parents came to visit the following year, both of them, their first time ever leaving Iran, their first time ever on an airplane. My father did not say much about the airplane experience except that it was longer than he had expected, which was the most complaint he was going to make about something that had frightened him considerably. I knew, though he would not have used that word. I drove them from the airport in the evening, and we arrived at the house in the dark. My mother stood in the front yard for a moment, looking at the house, this modest house with its maple trees and its ordinary street, and she pressed her hand against her mouth, and I understood that she was seeing, from the outside, something I had been inside for so long, I sometimes forgot to see it. In the morning I made Iranian tea from the proper tea that my mother had packed in her luggage, the good loose-leaf tea from Lahijan that she sent me every few months in packages. I always opened too quickly, sitting at the kitchen table while Linda fed. Cyrus and the morning light came through the east window. My mother and father sat across from me, and Cyrus came and climbed into my mother's lap with the complete confidence of a child who understands instinctively that this person loves him, even though they have never met before, even though they speak mostly different languages. My father drank his tea and looked around the kitchen with those careful mechanic's eyes that evaluate everything for how it is put together, what condition it is in, whether it is sound. And then he looked at me, and he said, in Persian, quietly, without any particular decoration, "You built a good thing." He did not mean the house, or not only the house. I knew what he meant. I had been my father's son long enough to understand what lived inside his few words. I said, I had a good beginning, and I meant the $100, and I also meant him. The repair shop, the wallet, the tired hands that had worked all those years to give me a beginning worth having. Even a modest one. Even a careful one. I meant all of it. He nodded. He picked up his tea. Outside the kitchen window, the ash tree was just beginning to leaf out. The new green of April. And somewhere in the branches, I noticed it and said nothing, just noticed it privately. I could see the red birdhouse, listing slightly, more faded now, its roof still slightly uneven. My father's eyes followed mine out the window. He looked at the birdhouse for a moment. He said, "Cyrus made that?" And I said, "We made it together." And my father smiled, a small, spare smile, the kind he kept in reserve for the things that mattered most, and said nothing else, because nothing else was needed. I have been in this country for 18 years. Cyrus is 12 now, and he builds things still. He has moved past birdhouses into more ambitious projects, and last summer he built a small bench for the backyard entirely by himself, measuring and cutting and assembling with a focus that I recognize down to the cellular level. He speaks English with no accent and Persian with my accent and sometimes mixes them in a way that is its own language, the language of a person who lives in more than one world simultaneously and has made that multiplicity into something whole rather than divided. Linda is still at the library. She was promoted to branch manager 2 years ago, and she is as happy in the bigger role as she was in the smaller one, which is the mark of someone who is where they belong. She has learned to make certain Iranian foods better than I can, which is a fact I find both humbling and very pleasing. I started my own small engineering consulting firm 6 years ago. Not large, just me and 2 other engineers, working from an office in a building near downtown, mostly working with mid-sized companies on efficiency and process problems. It is exactly the size it should be, no larger and no smaller, calibrated to what I can do well, rather than to what would be most impressive. I learned that calibration slowly, and I'm still learning it, but I'm learning it. My parents are older now. My father's hands are slower, the arthritis making its patient claim on the joints that have worked so hard for so long. He is still in the shop some days, though Darius runs it now, and he will still look at an engine and tell you what is wrong with it from a description over the phone, because that knowledge does not go anywhere. It only deepens. My mother still sews. My mother will always sew. I call them on Sundays. We cover everything in 20 minutes, same as always. The wooden box is still on my desk. It is empty now. Has been since the day I bought the tools. But I kept it. I kept it the way you keep the cup that held something good, the letter that came at the right moment, the small plain objects that have become more than themselves through what they witnessed. Sometimes I open it and look at the empty interior, the plain unfinished wood, the simple latch, and I think about the ocean and the plane and the dark and the stars and the wallet, and the $100 that was approximately $100, depending on how tired I was when I counted. I think about the man who got off a plane in Detroit in October with the maple trees burning gold everywhere, and almost nothing in his pocket and a direction. Just a direction. Not even a plan. Just a reaching. The way a plant reaches toward light. I think about what direction can become, given time and work and a few good people who find you along the way. I think about my father's hands and Cyrus's hands, and the red birdhouse and the ash tree, and the way the last note of something resolves into a chord when it has gone where it was going. And I feel, I want to name this feeling for you, as precisely as I can. I feel a deep, wide, grateful calm. Not happiness exactly, though happiness is in it. Not pride exactly, though that too. It is something older and quieter than either of those. It is the feeling of a person who has walked a long way, and arrived somewhere real and looks back at the road, and is not sorry for any of it. Not the length of it, not the uncertainty of it, not the long careful years of almost enough and not quite yet. It is the feeling of being exactly where you are supposed to be. So friend, wherever you are tonight, in whatever city or country, in whatever season your window shows, I want to offer you this story the way you would offer Someone something warm to drink on a cold evening. Just something to hold for a little while. Something that says, long roads arrive. Patient efforts accumulate. The things you carry carefully do not disappear. They wait for you to know what to do with them. Maybe you are far from where you started. Maybe the place you are building towards still feels distant, still feels like a direction rather than a destination. Maybe you have almost nothing in your pocket right now, and the ocean of what lies ahead is very large, and the stars on the other side of the airplane window are very far away. If that is you, and this story is for you especially, I want you to know that the arriving is real. It doesn't look like the movies. It looks like a morning in a kitchen with a window, with tea and a child in someone's lap and a man outside looking at a crooked red birdhouse in an ash tree and feeling, quietly and completely, that this is what it was all for. That is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything. And right now, in this soft, dark moment, you don't need to be any further along than you are. The direction is enough. The reaching is enough. The fact that you are still going, still trying, still here. That is the whole of what is required of you tonight. Let your body be heavy and warm. Let the thoughts that have been circling all day find their slow, patient way to the edges. Let them settle. Let them quiet. You are allowed to stop for these hours. The world will wait. The work will wait. Everything that needs your attention will still be there. Patient as old mountains. Patient as fathers who count what they have and put it away and go on. Patient as seeds in wooden boxes. Feel the warmth around you. Feel the weight of your own stillness. Let your breathing slow into the long, even rhythm that your body knows so well, has always known, will always know. You have been to sleep before. You know the way. The tea is made. The light is soft. The window shows whatever it shows. A street, a yard, a sky going dark with stars coming slowly through. Somewhere, maybe, trees are standing in the quiet, leaves or bare branches in the night air, holding whatever the season has brought them, asking nothing. You don't need $100 or a wooden box or a dream or a plan. You just need this breath, and then the next one, and the one after that, growing slower and deeper and softer as the night does what the night does, what it has always done, what it will always do. You are safe. You are here. You are enough. Sleep now, friend. The morning is coming, patient as ever, bringing its own light, its own chances, its own ordinary, extraordinary day. But that is for then. This is for now. Just rest. Good night. True. Tales for dreamers, new stories. Every day. Sleep well.